We're in a session about sustainable IT, of course, and I'd like to start by getting to know each other. And next on the agenda, of course, is sharing best practices. So today we're on the 5th workshop of a series of 6, and which all members of the UNICA Green and SDG work group share what universities are currently doing about the topic of climate. And today we are going to focus on sustainable IT. Sustainable IT that can include policies, objectives we already have, funding we know, useful standards we use, already running projects we have. But we would also like to discuss common challenges and solutions we've already implemented. And after the workshop, Matthew offered kindly to write a full report in which we can all help, in which we can all assist by identifying case studies, web links, websites, or providing documents to include in this full report that will be accessible for our UNICA members. Maybe we can start by getting to know each other. By stating which university you are representing, what is your role in the institution, and also it's interesting to describe quickly your climate journey. Are you really at the start of the journey? Do you already know the carbon footprint of your institution, or do you have already defined reduction targets, and are you already in the climate action planning trajectory? My name is Rebecca Lefevere. I'm a policy advisor on sustainability in the VUB, in the Dutch-speaking university in Brussels. We also have our sister university a few kilometers away, the French-speaking ULB, and also colleagues over there are very active in the UNICA Green and SDGs. I would like to give the floor to Matthew to represent yourself.
Hi all. Hey Rebecca, thank you so much. Hi, I'm Matthew. I'm Senior Program Manager at the University. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, it was perfect.
Yeah, no problem. So yeah, Senior Program Manager at the University of Edinburgh, but also the coordinator of the UNICA Green and SDGs Working Group. In terms of that summary, Rebecca, you asked about the climate strategy. We've got a well-defined climate strategy with targets, but we will be reviewing that strategy this year, and our carbon footprint just now sitting around about kind of 86,000 tonnes of CO2. So that's where we are just now, and I'll hand back to you, Rebecca.
I have the impression everybody hears each other, except I'm not hearing you. So, okay.
That's weird. Can you hear us? Can you hear me now, for example?
You can just continue to present yourself and meanwhile try to fix what's wrong.
No problem. Well, how about if I can coordinate this section and I'll pass back to Rebecca. Brilliant. How about we go to Sophie next?
Hello everyone, I'm Sophie. I'm a program manager at Vrije Universiteit Berlin International Summer and Winter University, and we organize the summer programs and also semester-long international programs for the university. We don't really have much influence over the overall university strategy, but internally we've started working on a lot of on sustainability matters. We're not very far yet, but I'm mainly here to get inspired, maybe, and I'm also on the web team of our program. So yeah, we're looking to get inspired by what other people are doing.
Fantastic, thank you very much, Sophie. And on to Ruud next.
Hi, hello, good afternoon. I'm the sustainability coordinator for the Central ICT department for the University of Amsterdam. We recently agreed on using longer our laptops and smartphones, and yeah, we have only just begun, but I think it's now accelerating, I hope. I hope to learn a lot from you this afternoon.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Ruud. And likewise, looking forward to learning more about what you're doing as well. On to Karina next.
Thank you, Matthew. My name is Karina, and I work at the University of Basel in the sustainability team with a series of projects. IT has not been on our radar for long. So we have been working on climate footprint, but scope 1 and 2 for a longer time. And now we are including scope 3, working quite a lot on that to try to define our climate strategy for the next years. And unlike others here, I'm here to learn. We don't know much, or we haven't done much. We have some ideas, and I'm looking forward to the exchange to see if we can learn and get some bites that will help us in our work forward.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Karina. And on to Bradley next.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bradley. I'm the IT reuse technician here at Edinburgh University. I'm based in the Department of Social Responsibility and Sustainability, along with Matthew. I'm the project lead for the IT reuse project here at Edinburgh University, and I look forward today to share a lot of what we've done and what we've put in place over the past few years with regards to reuse of IT equipment and sustainability in the IT sector. With regards to my journey in sustainability, I've been here for a number of years, so I wouldn't say I'm completely situated and I know everything, but it has been a great learning experience, especially when you specialize in one particular area, which for myself would be IT.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Bradley. And you've got the perfect backdrop for a discussion on sustainable IT today. On to Lauren next.
Hello, everybody. I'm Laurent from the University of Luxembourg. We are interested in, I'm responsible for sustainability, but as mentioned to a lot of colleagues, I'm responsible for myself because I'm the only one in the department. We are quite interested in IT because I have a lot of discussion with different actors within the university interested in putting sustainability in their operations. We have a large computing center creating a lot of emissions, and there are also some activities in terms of selecting right equipment, extending lifetime of the equipment, etc. So clearly I'm here to listen also the best practices that you have and try to share the ideas back to my colleagues. In terms of climate strategy, well, we have none. We are a young university. We are 19 years old, so we are a bit late in being conscious, but we are working on our first carbon analysis, footprint analysis, and we are done with the energy part and the buildings, etc. And we already noticed that our computing center is the greatest emitter of carbon equivalent. So clearly, this is something that we need to look at.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Lauren. And moving on to Kenneth. Kenneth, welcome to the session. We're just doing a brief round of introductions. If you could introduce yourself, looking at your name, your role, and also what your university is doing in terms of the climate strategy, that would be wonderful. And if Kenneth isn't there just now, how about we hand over to Vicky and then to Rebecca.
Okay, so nice to meet you all. I think most of you already know me. My name is Vicky and I work at UNICA Secretariat, co-coordinating the Green Working Group with my colleague Laura.
Thank you, Matthew, for taking over. Meanwhile, I can hear you all. So we can continue to the next part, and we've already identified the previous minutes some challenges: the energy use of IT, the life cycle impact, the carbon emissions during the life cycle of IT. There's also, I don't know if it's already mentioned, but some university also work on human rights and IT and problem of forced labor and child labor in the mining of precious metals used in IT. So there's a big scala of societal problems covered by the topic IT, and a lot of issues to tackle. I remember years ago, Greenpeace started to create awareness on toxic substances in IT, both in the production and the use and in the end of life, where a lot of IT was transported to Africa, for example, for deconstruction with all the health impacts and so on. So a lot of awareness rising started there a few years ago, but also at VUB we are not yet there that we have any policies except some working on the life on the extension of the lifespan use. So we went from 3 years to 5 years, which was already a first step. But I would love to hear more, and I would like to invite Mr. Bradley Richards to share your insight and your learning, because you have experienced quite a lot last years by working on sustainable IT. I'd like to give the word to you now.
Wonderful, thank you. So I've thrown together a slide presentation. We'll go through that. So yeah, we'll start with that. Please bear with me. This is my very first time using Zoom. I'm more of a Teams man myself, but hopefully we can get this. Let's try that. Sorry, bear with me 1 second. I've recently reformatted my laptop, so it's asking for permissions and everything again.
Yeah, it was just before the session. I was doing some quick research on sustainable IT, and I came a lot on the University of Edinburgh with good practices. So I'm really happy you're in the session.
Thank you very much. I think one of our proudest moments was when we won the International Green Award for good business practice. I think that's probably the highlight of my career. Okay, shall we try this again? Wonderful. Here we go. Please let me know if everyone can see it and it's come up correctly.
That's perfect.
Wonderful. So as we're all aware, my name is Bradley Richards. I'm the IT reuse technician here at Edinburgh University. I've been working on the IT reuse project now for about 4.5, 5 years, from basic conception, where at the university we couldn't move a couple of desktops from one desk to another without a multitude of questions in place, sort of surrounding things like who owns the asset, what we're doing with the data on it, data security, all these questions that we spent quite some time working through and trying to work out as we went along. So a quick overview of the IT here at Edinburgh University is we have around 5,000 academic staff. Now, these are from 2020. I couldn't find any more updated figures, unfortunately. And for every academic staff member, there is a minimum of 1 device. So everyone will have 1 device supplied by the university for them. Same goes with administrative staff. Students are a little bit of a gray area, being 35.3K of them. They don't all have a university laptop, or they aren't given a device from the university itself. However, we do take into consideration that these personal devices do need to be charged. They do consume power on campus. We are still paying for that. It is still adding to our carbon footprint. So all our desktops that staff and academic staff and our research staff and students use, they're all centrally supported by what we call central IS, Central Information Services. And these are on a 4 to 6 year replacement cycle. The reason for the 4 to 6 year replacement cycle is we've decided, or we've worked out for our best use case, is that every minimum of 4 years, maximum of 6 years, IT jumps up, processing power doubles, certain infrastructure falls off, architecture changes. We move from having service usable DDR3 RAM up to DDR4, which is no longer supported by old architecture. We have a huge number of computing labs around the university. So each college has schools, and each school has a set number of computing labs. And within these computing labs, they vary widely. Sometimes you have 20 machines. Sometimes you can have as much as 90 machines all in one area, and they all need to be supported and looked after by our central IS. The average number of devices in a college, and I think there's 5 or 6 colleges around the university, is about 900 machines that we procure, that we give out to our staff members, our academic staff. I've said around 900. Some schools are much larger, some colleges are much larger, and they have anywhere from 1,000 to 2,000. Some are much, much smaller and only have maybe a couple of hundred staff and students with them. So why is sustainable IT important to us? So the main concern and the main focus is the energy consumption of per device. So if we look back, say 4 years ago, we were running the old HP 8300 models, and they were using 400 to 500 watts. And that is not on peak load, that is just what they use. And as we've moved on, of course, our energy consumption has decreased, but this is mainly because we've been more thoughtful in the procurement of our devices. So if you have, say, 900 desktops, that's not including the power consumption from monitors and so forth. So if you have 900 desktops all using 500 watts, the impact, the carbon footprint of just that IT equipment alone is astronomical, and it adds up because they're constantly being changed. Sometimes we have this systems that we can monitor, but sometimes we don't. So we can't monitor everyone plugging their laptop in. It's not on a system. It's not something we can see all the time. Also, with the 4 to 6 year replacements cycle, it's continuous. It's not just a once off. It happens all the time through the life of the foreseeable future. So every 4 to 6 years, you're getting rid of quite a large amount of IT equipment, and this adds a substantial amount to the waste stream on the WE waste stream, the electronics waste stream. There's also the issue of conflict minerals within these devices, and that's something we deal with quite well with procurement, is tracing these conflict minerals, making sure we're not engaging. There's also, with the project, we have 2 areas of it. There's our internal reuse, which we say, right, so we have a department and they perhaps have overbought by 10 machines, or they have 10 machines that they've left in a cupboard as a backup, just in case. What we do internally is we try and find those and send those to other departments with a smaller, a lower budget, or perhaps it's really a stopgap to not prevent the purchase or procurement of new machines, but just have something in the meantime so we're getting use out of these devices that we have. There's no point in recycling a brand new machine just because it falls out of our replacement cycle policy. The other half of the project is our community engagement side, where because we're so big and we have such a large amount of IT equipment coming through, we reach out to the community and we help a lot of schools if they need to upgrade or replace their IT equipment. It's much better using, I say, a 4-year-old i5 processor than it is using an 8-year-old Core 2 Duo. It just runs better, it works better, you get a much better quality of usability out of it. So there's that, and we have a number of charity partners we have with. One of notably is Edinburgh Makery. We have a partnership agreement with them, and they've been an absolute brilliant partner to have with us. So we will touch on that a little bit later through the presentation, but that's sort of how we're tackling the social divide or social access to IT infrastructure and equipment. Then we also look at the carbon footprint of purchasing new IT equipment. It's not just the enclosed carbon of the machine itself. There's also the packaging materials, the delivery, the transportation, the importation, all these different factors that add to the carbon footprint of a single device. So the current initiatives that we have at the moment here at the university that the IT reuse project is associated with is, we're a founding member of Electronics Watch, which is rather great. It's that in turn has helped with make the ICT Fair project possible, which looks at sort of the trail of conflict minerals in the supply chain and how we can avoid it. We're also, I think, the first university to have a policy on conflict minerals, which I think is really great. We also have the one device policy, which has recently been sent out university-wide, but that's tied up in our sustainable IT policy. So the one device policy basically says to all staff and users that we supply equipment to, what is the least amount of IT infrastructure you need to perform your role. For example, you don't need an iPad to take notes, and a laptop, and a mobile phone, and a desktop. All of these can be done with one laptop. If you do get sort of pushback, it's, but I'm so used to using a desktop, is one of the things we hear quite often is, but I want a desktop. Well, we can supply you with a docking station and a screen with a keyboard and a mouse, which does exactly the same thing. So one of the colleges I'll use as an example here is LLC or HSS. I think they're the same college. And what they've done is they've said to all their staff members, right, we're getting rid of all the desktops because they're coming out of their cycle time. At this time, it was the midst of the pandemic, there's hybrid working, loads of people are working from home. Laptops were a more suitable option. So we then got rid of the large, I'm not going to say power hungry because they're a lot less power consumption on the newer desktop models, but we now have 25-watt laptop power supplies. And if you require a desk where you want to sit and work and have the experience of a desktop, we are now supplying a 65-watt docking station, which is a huge drop down from the power consumption of, I think, if I remember correctly, the current models are using anywhere between 215 and 300-watt power supplies. So it's still a module and you're still getting the same experience. You're still able to sit down at your desk. The sustainable IT policy is really talks about how do we make our IT sustainable. And there's a whole bunch of things in there, sort of how, most notably the one device policy, but sort of procurement and what is the best way and how can we elongate the life cycle of these machines. Over the pandemic, a lot of our machines weren't being used, so we've extended the life cycle of those. They will be supported now for an extra year. And one of the reasons it comes out of its supported list, so at the university here, we have a list we call the Select 5. I'm not sure why it's 5 because there's a lot more models in 5 on it, but there are a whole number of models which we support. And the reason for this is down to security. The hardware needs to be maintained, and notably this will be down to your TPM module, which is built onto the board. It's not upgradable, it's not replaceable. And as time goes on, these become vulnerable to all sorts of malware or DDoS attacks and things of the sort. So we try and keep on top of those with an updated version of the TPM module. There's also the IT reuse project, which I lead, which we'll get into later again, and community engagement. As mentioned previously, we have the Remakery, Edinburgh Remakery, and what we do is anything that we can't use internally, so anything that falls out of our supported desktops. Now, I think it's worth mentioning that there are some exceptions to this. For example, desktops or machines or IT infrastructure that is connected to lab equipment. These don't need to be replaced. These aren't seen as vulnerable because they're connected directly to a piece of equipment. Sometimes you can't change out the IT infrastructure attached to the equipment because you'd have to completely replace the equipment itself. So those are the exceptions. Those can be a little bit older, and as long as they're in working condition and they do what they're meant to do. Within community engagement, anything that doesn't fall in our supported list, we donate. We donate to either schools or local charities in and around Edinburgh. Our main partner is the Remakery, and what happens is we donate them anything they can use. Obviously, we don't donate them Apple II machines, which, well, they should be in a museum rather than, because then we're just adding to the waste stream. There is a certain cutoff where a device no longer becomes flexible. It's no longer usable. You can't run the latest OS. And even if it's not the latest OS, it's vulnerable to the minute you connect it to an internet connection, you've got a problem because it's a vulnerable machine. So we do donate everything that is usable out with the university, and the Remakery take them in and they rebuild these machines and sell them onto the community at a much reduced price, therefore helping people gain access to IT. Right. So we'll talk a little bit about the IT reuse project. It's what I do on a daily basis. So as I mentioned, we don't we try and avoid the recycling route as much as possible. That was a typo on my behalf, I apologize, but we reuse them. So if it powers on and we can put an OS on it, or it has some form of functionality, we try and extend that as long as possible. The project also, so one of the challenges we have is when starting the project was data concerns. It is of utmost importance. It's rather safe than sorry, I'd like to say. The chances of data disappearing is minimal, it's negligible. However, you have to be prepared in the account that should that happen, you need to have something in place to mitigate or bring down the level of danger that poses. So we at the university have decided that we will invest in data wiping software. And we did some research and we found that White Canyon provide a very good all-round solution with a good pedigree. And it does pretty much everything your local government or your local governmental department would do. DoD uses it, HMRC uses it, HMRC is the tax people. So there's a lot of big organizations and institutes that use the same pedigree of software. So we do that. We do data destruction as well. And what's nice about having in-house data destruction is you can provide certificates of data destruction. So you can say, right, if you bring in your drives, we can provide you with a paperwork trail that will say this drive has been wiped to the standard. And obviously there are different levels of data destruction. So for example, because we have managed desktops, not all of them save data locally. It's all saved via a server through your account. So it's very difficult to save data onto your personal work laptop. However, there are exceptions. So you do have research staff and students who would need copious amounts of data stored locally. And that's where we have the data destruction service that comes in. And it is what it says on the tin. You bring in your drives, we wipe them. The data destruction certificates are very, very useful because it gives a time of wiping. It gives serial numbers of not only the drive that you've wiped, but also the specifications and serial numbers of the physical machine it was attached to. So should any part of that go wandering, you have a paperwork, you have a paper trail saying it's been wiped. Again, all systems that cannot be used internally are donated externally. So over the past 4.5 years, our total number of just desktops and laptops being reused. Laptops are more of a recent thing. As time has moved on, I see most people are moving over to laptops, and this has got to do with hybrid working and working from home. It just makes more sense. So it's about 4,500, and we're aiming by the end of this year to bring that number up to 5,000 total. This is not including keyboards, mice, monitors, printers, any other form of ICT. And that gives us a cash saving just on desktops of about £533,000. Everything that we can't send either to our charitable partners or our local enterprise, we then donate to lower income schools and families. Not every school has the same budget as a large institution. So it is great, and it gives an avoidance. It's not going straight to the waste stream. It's not going to our waste carrier. It's going to be used for X amount of time. And the conditions of that is, should they need to get rid of it, should it come to the end of life while in their care, they can approach us and say, how do we get rid of this? And we will find a more sustainable way, rather than saying, just take it to your local dump. We offer that support for end-of-life devices. We also have Warp It, which is our reuse portal here at the university. And that's really, it's like the Gumtree for reused items. And it's all internal, so it's only available to staff and PhD students within the university. So if you work in a department and you perhaps find old labware, for example. So Warp It is not purely an IT reuse portal. It takes into account many things: office furniture, lab equipment, anything that nobody has a need for. You can post it up and you get notifications like, look, so-and-so is trying to get rid of this. And just a few figures from that, our CO2 saved and waste avoided is quite high as well, but it also saves quite a bit of money as well in the process, because you're not having to replace it, you're not having to pay for extra disposal. There are exceptions, again, as with everything, things like CRT monitors, fridges, anything with CFCs and so forth that needs specialist disposal, that we have a contracted waste, a waste courier for. And I think that kind of wraps everything up. I hope I didn't go too fast. Does anyone have any questions or anything?
Yes, I have. Bradley?
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm interested in the one device policy. Is that does it include also smartphones?
No. So the one device policy is not retrospective. If you are supplied a smartphone, the question that generally gets asked is, you can't make a phone call from your laptop. However, do you need your phone because you want to check your emails or want to use Teams, or do you need your phone because you physically have to make a phone call? It's on a user-based process, it's user-based. So for example, if I worked in the vet school, I would need a mobile phone because that's how my main point of contact would be via phone calls. As where me, as the IT reuse technician, my main point of contact is via emails. So it really have to look at it and weigh up sort of, are you using the least amount of devices to perform your role? Yeah. There are exceptions to the rule, but generally it blankets it over with trying to get as little IT infrastructure in to do one job.
Yeah, yes, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I also have a question on the one device policy. So if I understand right, you have described for several roles in the organization what kind of devices they need. And was it easily accepted by the university staff? Was there not a lot of opposition?
That's a lengthy answer, so I'll keep it quite brief. I had a meeting with some colleagues on Friday, last week Friday, and I asked that exact question. So I'm glad you brought it up. Initially, yes, because people have their workflow. People work a certain way. For example, if you're used to taking notes on an iPad, you're going to be quite reluctant to move away from that because you're used to typing on a touchpad, a touch screen rather than a laptop. But with a little bit of convincing, the uptake of it was rather painless. You just have to give people an option. You have to give them an alternative. So there's no point saying, here's a laptop and that's what you're working off of, when again, they're clearly used to using a desktop. So if you can meet them in the middle, but find a more effective or efficient way to do that, it works out for them. And the pushback, that, as my colleagues and I were having a chat, initially there's always going to be pushback. People don't like a lot of change, especially when it comes to how they do their job and how they work. They feel it's going to affect their productivity. But over time, I think once they see, oh, look, so my colleague has decided not to use a desktop anymore, but they've got a nice laptop that they can work from anywhere. And if they do want to work at their desk, it's just a matter of plugging it into a docking station, which can be as simple as a USB hub with a VGA port on it, just so they can use a keyboard and a mouse and a monitor. So I think the key to having a good acceptance to a one device policy in particular would be offering an alternative, rather than being extremely rigid and saying, no, this is it. If you're a little bit flexible and you sort of encourage that behavior of change is always good.
Thank you, Bradley.
I also have a question. Oh, sorry, Rebecca.
Yeah, I was asking, is there anyone else having a question? Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. I just wanted to ask if you already have any information about how the pandemic has affected this, and how switching to online classes and maybe everyone using more online devices has changed anything about this, or was it offset by people using less paper? And what can we do to make online teaching more sustainable? I've heard a lot about, I don't know, switching off cameras and stuff like that because it uses more energy. Yeah, do you have any information about that?
I can give you I can draw on from what I have known. I don't particularly deal directly with students in online teaching, but from a hardware point of view, from a hardware stance, yes, you're absolutely correct. Things like switching your camera off, changing your battery or power consumption settings on your laptop, these do make differences, even though they're quite small. They don't really affect, for example, with the laptop I'm using, when I'm doing menial tasks like checking emails, writing up Word documents, that type of thing, I tend to put the laptop into a low power consumption mode. So it'll set it, it won't run the processor at 100% because you're writing a Word document. It will reduce, and a lot of the more modern laptops that we're seeing coming out, especially from manufacturers like HP, Lenovo, Apple, are getting their finger in that pie a little bit, but they're not really committing. Those things, there are options to reduce your power consumption per machine, and it's becoming more prevalent in the way these machines operate and run. With regards to online teaching and sort of internet connected devices, I guess that's down to sort of how the person uses the machine. It's down to sort of their behavior patterns. And for example, some people love a super bright screen, as where if you turn it down maybe 2 or 3 levels of brightness, there is a power saving there. Not only is there a power saving, but it also makes your battery last just that little bit longer to get you through the day. So there is that. With regards to this move from, because a lot of pre-pandemic would have been done in person and face-to-face, there would still been a number of people who prefer to use laptops. But I do think that what we've been seeing, the latest trend, is because everything is done online now, the need for paper handouts or the use of paper has drastically declined. One example I can give of that is our court, for example, here at the university. It's just a large group of people. They get together and they discuss all sorts of matters. And they used to use paper, but over the past, I think maybe 3 years ago, they've moved away from paper, and everyone was issued a tablet, and everything can be done. So rather than having to print out copious copies of the same document, you can just send it out via email. There is the other side of that is the security risk, but if you have a managed device and you have a centrally managed systems, that tends to mitigate a lot of the security risk. So to answer your question, yes, I do think that because everything's moving to more of an online environment, the need for paper has drastically reduced. For example, I've had the same notepad now for about 1.5 years because I discovered OneNote, and I use OneNote for everything. So it really is sort of helping people find what helps them. Some people like to write things down. Some people prefer to have everything on their laptop. But just to reiterate, yes, I do think that because teaching and learning has become more of an online thing, the use of paper has decreased quite substantially.
Thank you. Maybe also, I don't know if other people have experience with at their universities with how online teaching has influenced anything. Of course, that would be an interesting discussion, but yeah.
To answer for Vrije, we are now somewhere in between. So there was a lot of online lessons, and amongst the students, there's a huge will to come back on campus and to have 100% physical learning and being on campus. So now we're a bit in between, and everybody wants to be on campus. So there's some reluctance to think about blended learning. So it's a bit a difficult time to start. It's the best moment to start thinking about how we will organize us in the future, to have a mix of online and offline, also to save on mobility to campus. But students are really not in the mood now to discuss this, because they just want to be on campus and have 100% physical courses. Do you feel the same in your universities? Is there any awareness or willing to work on policies toward this?
I can comment, right? Yeah.
Go ahead.
I'm in Nairobi, Kenya. My name is Kenneth, working at the University of Nairobi. Last year, in 2019, I registered for my course as a MSc supply chain, though I'm working here at the same time. So I was going to be part-time student. So of course we started in 2019 before Corona. Then when Corona struck, we started online. I've just cleared waiting to graduate for that course. But then in the WhatsApp group, based on your question, in the WhatsApp group of the class, recently I saw the administration is trying to change for this specific master's class. They want to have both blended learning, in campus and off campus, online learning. And most students commenting on that, they were complaining they didn't want to, to come back to campus. But you can understand this because most of them are working professionals. So spending time commuting to the university will be difficult for them. On the other hand, the younger ones who just got admitted, those now are doing undergraduate programs, they really would love to be at the university studying. But again, there are those within the undergraduate level that they feel they need a blended learning due to the nature of their circumstances. Some would be working part-time. Some would feel, studying online will help them to get work and work part-time. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for your answer. Is there anyone else who would like to react, or do we continue to a new series of questions?
In Luxembourg,
Karina? Sorry, Karina was raising her hand.
Sorry.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Karina.
Karina, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, my mic was up. I had a very different question to Bradley and more regarding to the waste stream at the end of life of the products. How do you handle that? I mean, do you have a contractor that works for you? How do you make sure at the end of life you get the minerals out that are actually worth taking out? Or how do you handle the waste at the end of life?
So that's a very good question. Thank you. Yes, we do have a waste contractor. We've had the same waste contractor for a number of years, and they also reuse. So if, for example, I have a whole bunch of, let's say, much older machines that we can't reuse, we can't donate, but there's still within them, there's still a lot of minerals and still a lot of precious metals and so forth in them. We then take these machines and we send them to our waste contractor. And what they do is they reuse, I think it's, last time I checked, it was 30% of everything we send to them, they reuse. And this can be right down to older processors they can take out and marry with a much, not a much newer, but a slightly newer motherboard and get a new working system from that. That's on their reuse side. Same with our hard drives we send them. They also do data destruction. So if we send them, so here at the university, we have a mandate where we can't use anything smaller than a 512. The reason for the 512 gigabyte cutoff is that we have a catalog of software that needs to be available to all staff and students at all time. So there needs to be space available for that. So anything below that, we tend to either wipe ourselves and donate to our charitable partners and our social enterprises. And when it comes to the end of life, so smaller drives like 120 gigabyte drives, 60 gigabytes, 80 gigabytes, these and also different architecture. So at the moment we're running the general norm for hard drives. It's just standard SATA drive, but the further back you go, the architecture has changed. So you have SAS drives. We can't reuse those. However, our waste contractor can. They could, for example, have a number of servers that don't have drives in them where these SAS drives would fit perfectly. so they do reuse. Everything else, they tend to either extract the materials and recycle them individually. So for example, hard drives that can't be used, they will be shredded and the materials separated and then sold on to other or passed on to other places. For example, the aluminium that the drives are actually made of is ground down, it's put through a shredding machine, and then large bags of this aluminium is then passed on to organizations or sold on to smelting plants as extra aggregate. Rather than having to source a whole bunch of new aluminium, you can add some that has been taken from the process of end-of-life hard drives. And same applies for the plastics and other materials that are in desktops. I'm not sure if that answers it 100%.
No, thank you very much. Yes, it gives an idea of how you handled it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to hand over to Laurent. Go ahead, Laurent.
Yes, thank you. I have also another question to Bradley regarding the waste flow. Do you have some experience in, is this a good option to try to have deals with original equipment provider and try to get them, give them back the computers so that they recycle themselves? Is that to you a good idea? Because I do not know really what they do, if they reuse the minerals and all the plastics to produce again, or if this is a bad idea because they just put it in waste in the bin without our knowledge.
No, absolutely. One thing that we have, and we've been working on for a number of, I'm going to say about 2 years now, is a take-back scheme with HP. So a lot of our devices here at the university are HP devices, and we've been in discussions and working out sort of, if we have machines and we have them for 4 to 6 years, they're still usable, will you take them back? Now, as far as I'm aware, HP is they're very good with sort of their minerals, and they are quite sustainable. So it is something. I don't necessarily think it's a bad idea. Unfortunately, there's a lot of things that need to be answered first. Sort of, will they look after your data if there is any data on it? What exactly they do with these? The last thing we want to do, or the last situation we would like to get ourselves into, is a couple of years ago with Apple not disclosing where they get all their minerals from. That is the last thing as a sustainable university you want to be engaged with. So it is a work in progress. I don't necessarily think it's a bad idea. I think it is a great way to stem the waste electronics stream. But at the same time, we absolutely need to be sure that if we do have an agreement in place with, say, for example, HP or Dell or Lenovo, whoever it may be, that we or yourselves are happy that they're being transparent and you know exactly what they're doing. Sometimes with these larger companies and larger organizations, it's a little bit difficult because they want to protect their own investments. So it is something we have approached. It is something we're working on, but at the moment it's a bit of a minefield because it's very difficult to say, right, so we'll send you back 50 machines. What exactly are you going to do with them? Is it economical and financially viable for them to do it? And if not, how can you mitigate that? For example, one of the things that have come about recently, as you're saying, is rather than a take-back scheme, to reduce the carbon cost of procuring new IT equipment, when we purchase from HP, we buy in bulk. So we use less packaging material. It's not longer 1 HP per box, and each box has what comes in an HP box, another couple of boxes, as well as padding material. So now we just buy them on a pallet that's cellophane, and that way you reduce the packaging. So that's one step on the road to having a fully fledged take-back scheme. But like I said, there's a lot in there, there's a lot to mitigate, but it is something we're working on. I don't necessarily think it's a bad idea, no.
Matthew, you have a question, sir?
Yeah, not to put Bradley on the spot. Bradley, just going back to kind of the PC reuse project and, thinking about when you're starting that up with colleagues, what were maybe some of the key challenges you faced with starting that up. It'd be quite interesting just to know, what you had to face, what you had to encounter, and also how you overcame those challenges as well.
Absolutely, Matt. Not a problem. So the project started out with a couple of gentlemen in our department, my line manager, Alan, and a colleague, who we had a couple of old desktops that were sitting and no one was using them, and they were perfectly fine. But the challenge to move those desktops was extraordinary. Because they're managed desktops, it's not a matter of, I can unplug the Ethernet cable here and go plug it into that port and it'll work. It just didn't work. It would no longer be registered to that location on their system and you wouldn't have any access. So that was challenge one, was how do we deregister and re-register these machines if we reuse them? And the way we worked that out was all our systems that are that are supported by the university are kept on a database. And at the time, each department had their own computing officer. So the computing officer would have access to this. They could say, right, these machines with these serial numbers are no longer in this location. However, we can reassign them to somewhere else or pass it on to another department, and their computing officer could then re-register them. One of the other major, and I think I can't stress this enough, is data protection. It's every machine, regardless, will have some form of data on it. And we spent a long time speaking to our records management, my apologies, our records management department, our chief information security officers around the university, lots of heads of data security, and working out how and what would be the best process to mitigate should there be any loss of data. Now, the project's been running for about 5 years and we've never had one incident. It is very, very critical to the success of any reuse of IT to make sure that your data is protected. You have a foolproof, solid process in place. Our process is that we've purchased industry standard wiping software. And once I get the machines, regardless of where they come from, even if they are managed desktops, they still get wiped. All these certificates are kept on our local server for the department, accessible at any point should we need them. So that was the major challenge. The other challenge regarding, or sort of around starting up something, is people's perceptions. There has to be some form of behavioral change. Some people are just not willing to use a reused machine. And the excuses vary from, but it's not as good as the one I have, but the one you have is 4 years old. The one I'm giving you is 3 years old. It's sort of the educational process behind it. It's like trying to explain to my dad why he needs to move away from the laptop he's been using for 10 years. And he still uses Windows 98. And it's strange. It's very strange. But there is that form of behavioral change that people need to be willing to engage with it. Also, I find a very good driving factor behind giving a successful project and getting it off the ground is incentivize. Say, right, we have this project and we can give you 20 machines. What is the budgetary saving on that for your department or your school? Make them aware of sort of the carbon implications behind it. As I've mentioned, I think behavioral change and education, and just to incentivize it just that little bit, helps people understand and accept it more. So those are the major challenges. And there's obviously your logistical challenges of moving these machines. As you can see, you need space. IT equipment takes space. I've been very fortunate. The university has always been provided with space, and I've always been able to store things, work on things, repair them, upgrade them, send them back out. Upgrading is also a very important part of the reuse cycle, because there's no point taking out an i5 2.7, or sorry, I think we use 2.5 gigahertz processors with 8 gigs of DDR3 and giving back somebody the exact same thing, maybe a year younger. So if you have a space and you have somewhere where you can store and work on IT equipment, if you have a technical person or a technician available, most people today know how to upgrade the RAM in a desktop. And the very nice thing is the upgrading of a simple couple of components within the machine it will give it a much longer life cycle. So that's something that you could do as well to incentivize. So rather than saying, all right, we'll take your old i5 8 gig and we'll just give you a year younger i5 with 8 gig. Perhaps you could say, well, we'll take your i5 with 8 gigs and 500 gig hard drive, and we will give you back an i5 with 16 gigs and a terabyte of storage space should you need it, because you will get machines in, because a lot of it will be seen as a waste stream, and you can reuse a lot of the components that come out of these machines. And one of the nice things is if you do purchase in large quantities for institutions or organizations, is you always get a corporate built machine. They build for corporate use and they're extremely upgradable. There's no hassle, to say the least. If you need to remove something, you don't have to get a padlock and unlock it and then do an extraordinary amount of screws to then go dig under things. It's all laid bare because they use that's just the way they've been designed. They've been designed very efficiently. So upgrading is also a very good incentive to keep the project. Other challenges you come across apart from behavioral change and general, there is a little bit of reluctance to engage, because then they start asking questions of, oh, but it's a reused machine, is it reliable? Well, it's just as reliable as your 5-year-old machine, although it's younger. There's no difference. So education, just around those certain areas and helping people change their behaviors, that is really how you just get things moving forward. I hope I've answered that correctly. If there's any, perfect, okay.
Is there anyone else with a question?
Can I follow up on the questions on waste again?
Yeah, go ahead.
We're talking about the Take Back program. Also, do you do anything with leasing, trying not to own the machine, but try to rent it so that, again, it's a different way of giving it back to the supplier?
Most certainly. Again, that is something that ties in very closely with the take back scheme. I've noticed the lease culture has become quite popular recently, where leasing machines. So what the project does is we will lease out laptops to staff, and mostly staff, for home use. If you need one for home use, and so for example, especially during the pandemic, you had a lot of people who had home with their children and they only had access to one laptop. So we're happy to lease you that laptop as well, as long as the correct documentation is in place. Liability when leasing things is a major concern. And so when we lease something out from the project, it is stated that it has to come back. It doesn't have to come back now. It doesn't have to come back in a month's time. When you are done with the device, so rather than disposing of it, bring it back to us. And these are the same concerns that are prevalent within larger organizations as well. So if you scale it up, those concerns are still there. For example, if we lease machines from Dell or Lenovo, how long do we have them for? What can we do with them? What are the restrictions on them? Because they're not our asset. So for example, if we wanted to run a great example of owning an asset versus leasing an asset would be our College of Art recently needed to step up their rendering for their digital art. And if you were to lease these machines, the machines from a supplier, there could be something in the clause where they have to be used in a certain way, or you have to maintain them with certain software, as where if you own the asset, it allows you to do other things with them and you reuse them and use them in different ways. So what they did was they just took 20 machines, networked them all together and built a rendering farm. As where if they lease the machines, we're not sure if that would be in the terms or what even the terms are. So leasing would be a good idea, but I think it would be very wise to start on a small scale and see how that would scale up rather than just going all the way in, because you might find out that a certain supplier will lease you machines, but they don't have a warranty on them. You just have to send it back. And then what happens if 2 of the machines break in a small department, then half the department doesn't have a machine, then you've got to wait for them to come back. So there's a lot of brokering, I would imagine, with leasing something to make sure that what you're leasing, even though it's not your asset, will perform like it's your asset. It's a lot like leasing a car. You only get so many miles you can use on it before you have to bring it back. It's your responsibility to look after certain things, and at what point do the financial costs of maintaining that machine and running that machine outweigh the amount you paid for the lease on the machine? So there is a lot. Like I said, it does tie into the take-back scheme. I hope that helped.
Sure. Thank you for sharing your ideas. You know, at the University in Luxembourg, you know, budget and financial cost is a strong incentive, and this is still, unfortunately, the criterion that everybody is looking at. And so one of the big issues that we have with the equipment is that, in fact, they pile up, you know, on the shelves. And yes. Even if I started a small program of donating and identifying what we can do, in fact, there are many of them, you know, all around. With the leasing, what I like with that is that it gives you strong incentives to manage your own inventory, and you know you have to give them back.
Absolutely,
that's it. Otherwise, you pay for them. And so, if you are really interested in managing your budget, clearly you need to make sure that you know where they are, you maintain them well, and you give them back, and at least you solve in a small way the waste issue, because you give them back, and you hope, of course, providing that the supplier is doing the right thing, that they are put back in circulation, upgraded or recycled. The problem is that we have right now, we own, and when we own, this is a black hole. Yes. You know, it's everywhere.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you. You're correct. Budgetary incentive plays a large key factor. I think that's true for every university. There are ways to mitigate that. For example, our graduate department, it's a small department. I think there might be 4 people who work there. They were subsidized. So the university said, right, well, not the university, I think they're a slightly separate entity to the university. But what they did was they said, right, you require an upgrade to your IT. How about we take a small chunk of our budget and we will top up what you would like, and then use that as a personal laptop and a work laptop. There is a bit of a gray area there, because you need to make sure that your university work and university systems are secure, as well as personal use of that system. But I think there are other ways to do that, as well as, like you said, with leasing. So if you sort of help with the costing of it, then rather than having 2 devices, you have 1 device again. And also that way, at the end of the life of the machine, they can choose to keep onto the machine as their personal, or they can give it back to the school or the department, and then the department can then say, right, we can either pass it on to the larger university, or we can send it, if it's completely not usable, we can extract what we can from it, any usable components. And I think that's one way to do it. But no, I completely agree with you.
Thank you. Matthew had to leave us. Thank you, Matthew, if you still hear us, for attending, and see you next time. I also had a question. I feel like you're really in a key position to make a fair ICT project feasible, because you have both the ICT expertise. For me, you're talking sometimes ICT Chinese. I'm not an ICT expert, but you also have the sustainability expertise. So it's very interesting how you are in your role at VB. It's separated. We have an environmental and a sustainability experts, and then we have ICT experts, and it's difficult to interfere. So how did you grow in your role? Were you working in the IT department and then came in the sustainability group, or how did your role?
More than happy to share with you. So I was an IT technician before I started work at the university. We'll go back even further than that. I grew up where my dad was an IT technician. He ran his own technical company. So computers have been something that I've always been around, and they've always been something I'm familiar with. It's sort of like a second nature. My interest in the workings of IT was at a young age, where I discovered the beautiful thing called a synthesizer and how to build them. So I'm very interested in the component level of things and how things work. And then I spent a long time working as a technician for a lot of mainstream shops and so forth in the city, where you bring in your device and repair it. But the culture just wasn't for me. It didn't work. It didn't feel right, because the amount of money you pay to bring something in to be repaired and the work being done, it's a whole different ballgame. I came to work at the university as an intern. It was advertised as a 3-month internship, as at the time it was called the PC Reuse Project. And it was the PC Reuse, I can't remember my first title, I apologize, but it was an internship for 3 months and development assistant. And we developed the project, and it took a number of years. It didn't just happen overnight. So I started off with the Department of Social Responsibility and Sustainability. And as far as I'm aware, I'm the only person who has this role in the university. It's a very niche, unique area, given that it's so closely tied to sustainability and social responsibility. So I started off just on a 3-month internship, and we worked through it. And what started off as a 3-month internship is now turned into a 5-year career. I'm still here and I'm still doing it.
Yeah.
But I think it's very important to have an understanding of both sides. Technicians can be very hard-headed because they like things to be done their way most of the time. And we do face those challenges quite often here at the university with our IT department. Like I mentioned, we have one centralized IT department, and they can be very stuck in their ways sometimes. Again, that ties into behavioral change, and it's there's a lot of debate that goes on. There's a lot of talking, a lot of this committee and that committee and this steering group. I think one of the best things when we started the project was we had an sustainable IT steering group. And this consisted of a couple of heads of IS, so desktop management being one of them, because they are the people who manage these machines. There was also our chief information security officers. They needed to be kept in the loop as well, so they could tell us sort of, right, these are the threats we foresee coming in the future. And that's why we settled on, we will gauge our machines by the TPM, the Trusted Protection Module, I think it's called. And that stores the basic protection of the machine. Once you work around that, and in all honesty, it took about 2 years of negotiating and trying to find a way where you don't want to thrust changes onto people. You don't want to say, all of a sudden, now we're reusing everything. That's how. I think the option to say, right, if you'd like to be more sustainable, if you feel that you would like to be socially responsible and help the equality divide outside of the university, by all means, we have this available for you. You can partake in this. So it is getting all the parties, different parties around the table and trying to get them pointed in the same direction, a lot like a Casablanca Convention. Before you move forward and decide to implement something, it's always good to have your team, your home team, facing the same direction, because when, I'm not going to use the word if, because when a pushback does come, and there are going to be loads of hurdles, for example, our reuse project wasn't exactly celebrated by our waste contractor because we're stemming their waste stream. So there was something there that we needed to take into account, that all of a sudden now they're not going to be getting 3- and 4-year machines. They probably still will be getting them, but their numbers will be slightly reduced. So there's that concern you need to take into account as well. So working in social responsibility and sustainability, you get to see both sides of it. And when I first started, I knew nothing about social responsibility. I didn't even know it existed. I was like, oh, wow, this is a whole new thing to me. But I think just being keen and engaged and just trying to learn as much as you can. The technical side of things, there will always be someone to do that. It's more the pointing of the project or the program or even the initiative. It's just pointing it in the right direction, because one of the major pushbacks we had, not only from our waste contractor, was from sort of other charities being like, but we do that just because you're bigger. Why do you get to do it? And the thing is, you got to let people know you're not trying to steal their thunder. You're just trying to help. So that's how we've been going for the past, 3 years, but the main challenges are just getting everything set up, getting people engaged, helping people understand that it's not necessarily about, it might not be something you would like to engage in, but there will always be that market. And I rely very heavily on the other side of my, so like you said, there's a technical side and the sustainability side. And I think just finding ways that they can meet in the middle, for example, conflict minerals. Of course, that applies to ICT. The same with supply chains, carbon footprints, those type of things. It's just finding the middle ground for the two of them. I hope that answers it okay for you.
Yeah, it's an interesting position because we are really struggling to implement sustainable IT, and maybe indeed start with a project and dedicated time and really recruit someone for that. That could be a good option. Thank you so much.
No worries.
Are there any other questions? No. Okay, Laurent, go ahead.
Yeah, we discussed about waste. What about the energy consumptions of the equipment? Do you have a specific policy or a focus on labels, you know, Energy Star or something like that, that you use and you as a policy or as a recommendation? How do you manage that? And also, how do you measure, you know, the energy consumption of those equipment?
Absolutely. That's what I spent the first year of my my time here doing. To find the actual energy consumption of a desktop is quite difficult. It's not just a matter of plug the desktop into an energy monitor and there's your answer. Because they're machines, they get used differently. Everyone uses a machine differently. Like I mentioned earlier on, some people like a bright screen. Some people love to have their webcam on. It all depends how the machine is used. So we got a carbon analyst in at one point who did a carbon report. I was going to present it today. Unfortunately, they've rejigged our website, so I can't find the report. But when I do, I'll ask Matthew to share it with everyone. And the basic process of it is, we'll start with recommendations for buying machines. Every computing officer, directly from the top down, they're not told, but it's strongly hinted at that try and get something that's not going to charge an arm and leg to run. There's no point in running a Z220 ThinkStation, which is a workstation, a desktop, which consumes anywhere from 750 watts to 2000 watts, depending on usage. Things like when you purchase the machine, what configuration are you using? Does it need a graphics card? Because a graphics card will also then consume power, even though it's just pushing your Word document on the screen. It's things like that. When you configure the system, for example, if you work in a reception, you're going to be looking at a lot of calendars. It's a lot of multitasking. So then you would go for a more multitask-friendly processor, which will be a little more energy will consume a little more energy. But if you're just doing standard office work where you're not going through multiple calendars, you're basically just doing one job, then it's more appropriate to go for an i5 with 4 threads and 2 cores rather than an i5 with 8 threads and 4 cores. So it's really down to the system configuration in the first place, that if you're conscious about energy consumption right at the beginning in the procurement stage of these devices, then you're putting yourself in a good position, because even at the max usage is where we kind of started calculating this from, was there's no point in saying, oh, it might use 200 watts, it might not. If you're running Adobe Photoshop or any Adobe product, it's going to use more power. That's just how machines work. But if then you buy a machine or procure a machine that is built for that, and try and keep the numbers down. So no one's here at the university, we're not telling people don't do it, but we're just be conscious. Just be conscious of sort of the energy consumption, and make sure that if you're buying a machine for general purpose, perhaps look at a slightly more energy efficient. If you're concerned about the carbon footprint of machines, don't buy a large desktop, buy a smaller form factor which uses less material, that type of thing. So we managed to get sort of, like as I was saying earlier on, the the power usage in watts is generally we got from testing these machines, but they're not in a real world scenario. These are just what the machine uses. We have at the university, I'm not sure if it's still active, I haven't looked at it in a couple of years, but we had a gentleman who wrote a piece of software that runs on the network, and it detects when PCs are on. And from the reason it will detect when PCs are on is because you have to update them. And the best time to update them is when no one's in, or the machines are in idle or in S1 sleep mode. So the machine would wake up, install the update, and go back. So we could monitor how many machines were active on the network at any point. We couldn't tell you what they were doing, but we could tell you if they were active. And we then took what we learned from that. So at any given point, there were 15,000 machines actively running throughout the campus. But these were the ones we only knew of. These were the ones that were hardwired into the network. The Wi-Fi, you wouldn't be able to do the same thing. So we knew how many machines were running. And from that, you can kind of get a rough idea. It's not a solid number because, like I said, someone might be writing up a Word document which uses 100 watts, as where someone might be running Adobe Photoshop or Premiere, which is using 400 watts. So there is a difference. There's also monitors. Monitors are a huge energy consumer. We understand people like 2 monitors. Everyone loves to have 2 monitors, but do you really need 2 monitors if you have a laptop? Your laptop already has a monitor, a screen. So it's small things like that. We try and keep up to date with we try to aim somewhere in the middle. So unless there is a legitimate reason for you to need a 4K high resolution UHD monitor, a normal monitor which runs 1080 would suffice perfectly fine. What I do religiously every 6 to 8 months is I have a look at sort of the catalogs available, and you can see from there which ones use less power. They will. The trade-off with this is the functionality is the same, but it's the little bits extra that you get with it. So for example, I have an HP monitor on my desk. It only has 1 HDMI input and it doesn't go very bright, but it uses next to no power consumption at all. It runs off a 12-volt adapter, as where you have the older HP models from about, let's say 3 or 4 years ago, that still use the old kettle cord. So that's 200, well, here in the UK, it's 240 volts in. And the problem we have is not the monitor's consumption, it's people not turning the monitor off. Even in sleep mode, that little light is still using. And if you have 100 machines all sitting in standby with monitors on, collectively they're consuming quite a bit. So we found a way to have a look at sort of what was running. And one of the things we did, which worked to an extent, was we printed off these little stickers. And you just put them on the monitor that says, please remember to switch your monitor off. And we did have quite a large uptake in this. A lot of people were like, oh, I completely forget sometimes, or I've got a sticky note over my light and I can't see if the monitor's on or off. So it's the little reminders. And we found that worked well for monitors. So we put them on all the light switches in buildings. And that it had a slight impact, but it wasn't a massive impact. But any impact is better than no impact. So there was that. The other half of your question was measuring what these machines use. Like I said, it's very difficult because every machine being used differently, every monitor having a different Energy Star rating. The changes can be as subtle as having 1 hard drive or 2 hard drives in the machine. So standardization, I think, would be very, very useful to have. If everything's standardized and everyone does, not everyone's going to do and work exactly the same way. It's a lot like some people have a very clean desktop with no icons on it, and some people, the desktop is just icons. So that kind of shows the different ways in how it's used. So some people leave 10 or 15 Google Chrome tabs up, which is then bringing up the amount of RAM that needs to be constantly accessed. So it's little things like that from a technical point of view. From a more sustainable and behavioral point of view, like I mentioned, little things like stickers tend to help and bring down. What we did, and if you would like to measure it yourself, is if you do get an energy monitor, plug the desktop and the monitor in, and then for a week, and see how it performs in the real world. and then use that, but you'd have to take samples from various locations everywhere around, and then sort of look at the mean data for that and say, right, this seems to be the trend of these sort of things, and then perhaps go try the same process of measuring the energy consumption on different models in different environments, things like that. For example, we don't have any on-site server rooms. We've completely gotten rid of all of them. Everything is now moved on to the cloud platform. But again, we all are very much aware that having a server room, not only is it the cost and the carbon cost of the physical room being there, it's also keeping it cool. That in is much more costly than just having the equipment available. And we did measure the power consumption for a single department's server room. And yeah, I don't think anybody needs to use 4,000 watts an hour. I think that's quite a lot of power just to access a hard drive location maybe once or twice a week. So there's a lot behind it. But if you do have a way where you can find out how many systems are active at any given point, you can work from there. Last thing from me is sleep states. Some computers can't be switched off because they're running something in the background, or they just need to be accessible. They remote desktop, they're remoting in somewhere if people work from home. It's always worthwhile having a look at sort of what options are available for the sleep states of these items before you buy them or procure them. For example, we have really small, I don't have any to hand at the moment, but we have what's called ultra small USF. They're just really, really small desktops. They're normally used for putting behind TVs or all-in-ones. And those are our general go-to for everyday drivers. So people who work in offices and things like that. Just a small desktop, low carbon footprint, low energy consumption. It gets the job done. That sort of thing, as where if I went down to, say, our engineering department, they're not going to take that on board. They want something where they can run their AutoCAD and things like that. So I think if you could find a way to see, I have a snapshot at any given point of what's running on the network. There are carbon calculators available online, energy consumption calculators. I think HP are really good for that as well. They have one per their model. You can work it out from there. So I think to work that out, you'd have to just get a snapshot of everything that's running at the same time. I hope that answers that for you. Thank you.
Ruud, you have a question too?
Yes, I'm mute. Yeah, Bradley, you mentioned the cloud, of course. And I was wondering, do you at Edinburgh have any idea, unlike we in Amsterdam, about the carbon dioxide impact of our storage? Up to now, it has been, the subject has been the hardware that we own, that we see, that we can manage. And of course, we now are putting all our stuff into the cloud, and really we don't have any idea so far of what is going on there. Do you have any experience with that as well?
Normally I specialize in hardware, so the cloud is a bit of a foreign. However, I do have a little bit of experience in this area. A couple of years ago, when we were in the process of moving away from our physical server rooms, we were looking at options. We're saying, right, so if we were to take 400 petabytes of data, who would store this and how would they store it? There is I think, SDU or GDU, there is a number associated with the efficiency of keeping a server room cool. I can't remember off the top of my head, unfortunately.
GPU or something, yeah.
So what we did was we went out and we started looking at different companies, different agencies, different organizations that offered cloud storage solutions. Now, I'm only speaking for storage solutions. I have no idea about sort of our services, our cloud services, but I know for our storage, we were looking at what is the most effective, cost-effective, efficient, and carbon-friendly way to store our data. Because, as I mentioned, having 6 server rooms running all the time so you can access the data once or twice, it's not really a good idea. It's very it consumes a lot. So we went around and we had a group of people again, as universities like to have steering groups and committees and a meeting about a meeting that this meeting is going to take place. And for about 3 months, we went through this whole process of looking at different companies. Now, Google came up, obviously, and it's down to sort of the technologies they use on site. Just because we don't see these machines that they store in them on, they're still machines. They still need to be cooled. They still have a carbon cost associated to them. So what we did was we just found the place, well, the organization or the group of people who ran a cloud storage service and had a look into sort of their practices. There's no point in us saying we're going to get rid of all our server rooms, but then we're just going to send it to a company who cools their services with Arctic ice. You don't want to do that. So we looked at places and looked at the technologies behind what they were using. A lot of places now have started keeping their online cloud servers in cooler environments. So further up north, you'd have them where they can be naturally aspirated and naturally cooled down. Obviously, it doesn't make a huge impact, but it removes some of the energy costs. So I think if you are looking at sort of cloud servers and cloud storage providers, I think perhaps have a look at the technology they use, have a look at sort of their business model, how they implicate things. Do they change with time? For example, server technology is always changing. I think it changes a little bit faster than your standard computing technology because there's such a great demand for it. But do they stay up to date with the current trends that are happening around? So for example, do they use 86 bladed fans rather than the standard 42 bladed fans? It's more efficient, uses less power. It's things like that on their behalf. So to the best of my knowledge, I could say, have a look, see who's out there, have a look at the technologies they're using, have a look at sort of the way they push it. You will find that there will, I think about a month into this exercise, we started seeing big differences. I hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. We're in the beginning of a big exploring journey on that subject. Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Bradley.
Thanks.
Yeah, it's super interesting. Thank you for all your inputs. Is there any topic we couldn't cover yet? Are there any remaining questions? I had also the one about the servers and the data, so that one is answered too. Anyone else?
I could share a remark. As I explained at the beginning of our meeting, is that we have a computing center and we also develop a lot of high performance computing. So this is clearly very energy consuming and creating a lot of impacts in terms of CO2. And also we are currently building a disaster recovery site to duplicate our data. And well, not my decision, but it's very close to the initial computing center. So if we have a plane crashing, I'm sure that both of them will be wiped out. But anyway, so here it's purely comfort, of course, and security, but it creates a lot of impacts. And I know that the person responsible of a computing center is very interested in looking at infrastructure related solutions. They are looking at trying now to cooling down servers with a less cold temperature. I don't know if it's proper English, but even I would say now normal temperature. So it's I think we are provided cold water at 13 degrees, and now we will be able to cool the equipment at 17 or 18 degrees. So it's less energy consuming, and also now we can have with our infrastructure for the high performance computing, it's already now without cooling, but it's creating, of course, a lot of heating. So when you are an operator, you have to be in shorts and t-shirts, but now it's possible to remove the cooling part of it, but it's brand new machines, and of course I cannot tell you the cost, the carbon cost of replacing the machines. So you know, but that's, so I'm no specialist, but I visited the the HPC and ask a lot of questions to try to understand how they operate and how I could relate that to my carbon footprint analysis. So if any of you is interested, I can also connect you to my colleague who is looking actively into solutions to decrease the consumption of energy and also the cooling part, and also trying to, but he's quite interested also in the carbon cost of this infrastructure.
Thank you, Laurent. Yeah. Okay, well, we have half an hour left. We can decide to continue or maybe just to end a little earlier the meeting, depending on how many questions are remaining. Or is there anyone who would like to share insights he or she already has at his or her university, or best practices you've already identified in your university? But I feel like we are all in the discovering phase of our sustainable IT journey. Yeah, me too. I was also looking for answers today. Okay, so everybody is satisfied. Every question has received an answer. Yeah, I think so. Well, Bradley, it was really a pleasure to have you. Oh, Laurent, sorry. Yeah.
Just a quick question. I just look at my notes. There are a lot of initiatives with our students to create repair cafes. And I was wondering in the RAPIP initiative from you, Bradley, or also from you on the other universities, if you try also to push these initiatives and try to recycle either from personnel, students and staff, and help them to repair or upgrade, or if you try to do that also for the professional equipment. I'm working at the moment on the donation stream, and there is a big diamond form shape, which is repair ? And before donating, or if we want to reuse internally. So Repair Cafe is not the only option, but I was wondering if this is in place with you and if you use it often.
Absolutely. One of the things we do here at the university is we have what we call it's our local drop-in, repair drop-in. And we have a number of, so we have some of the computing students. So it's divided into two sections. You've got, I think on a Tuesday, it's the main library. So the university has one big main library in George Square, and it's this huge building. It's fantastically huge. And they take out a certain section of it, and you have IT professionals from around the university who come down, and it's almost like a volunteering scheme where, if you'd like to help out a few people for maybe a couple hours. And I noticed before the pandemic, people love to do this because a lot of IT professionals sit in front of a computer all day. So any opportunity to get out to go do something else, they'll take it in a heartbeat, especially if it counts towards maybe if you have a nice manager, it'll count towards your yearly CPD, or it'll count towards your volunteering hours. It is incentivized that way. But we would have a number of computing professionals on a Tuesday, it would normally be desktop services and software and apps development, and they would come down. So someone, for example, has a laptop on it and they say, my Teams isn't working correctly, or I don't know how to update my Windows, but I want Windows 11. You can bring your laptop down, bring your charger, and they'll walk you through it. It's a little bit of teaching as well as helping fix the problem. If they can't fix it on site, what they do is we'd recommend you can either bring it to myself and I'll have a look at it, or if it's more on the software side of things, we send it to Edinburgh Makery, who have a number of software engineers that work for them on a volunteering basis, and they will have a look at it and offer that service at a much reduced price, rather than taking your computer to, say, a high street store where they'll charge you £100 or 100 euros to fix something which is as simple as installing a driver. I had a student last week who couldn't get their Wi-Fi to work after the Windows update. And I said, well, unfortunately, I'm not on campus, but if you can bring it down when I'm on campus, I'll take 2 minutes. It's a simple download and an install. And they're like, no, I can't. I have to get it done now. I'm going to take it to a store. And they got charged 50 pounds to install a driver. And I was like, So it is something we offer. We are aware that there is that hole there that we can fill. So on a Tuesday, it's mostly software things, or my Windows keeps crashing, or I keep getting the blue screen of death, or whatever it may be. Our software guys will try and help. On a Thursday is the hardware side of things, and that's where things get very interesting. It can start off with a simple thing of my key fell off my keyboard, can you fix it? To my newborn baby has just thrown up all over my laptop and it smells funky and I can't get it to work, which we've had a few times and it's not the greatest experience. But really then what we'll do is we'll put a name on it, we'll take it away, we'll open it up and we'll just clean it out and say to them, right, nothing's guaranteed. So that's only on a Tuesday and a Wednesday. It only happens once a month. It's a very limited thing, especially after the pandemic, the uptake for it, because there's not a lot of students on campus. Alternatively, we offer not courses, but time that you can volunteer with one of our local charities. So we have a charity called People Know How, and they're always looking for machines to donate to schools. We tend to, someone approaches us and says, I'd like to get a little bit of experience in installing Windows, or I'd like to get a bit of experience in, how do you open a laptop? Because at some point I might want to upgrade my own laptop. We do have charitable partners that, for obviously it's very limited spaces and times they can do that, but we do have things available to sort of help repair damaged goods. The other half of your question, of the waste thing, we do offer, or I do offer sort of personal recycling, but it's a bit tricky. For example, 2 years ago, this is where we kind of slid off. This is just one of the major challenges with offering personal reuse or personal disposable of people's personal items. I had a gentleman come along. He's like, here's my laptop. The laptop was almost as old as I was. And I was like, are you sure there's no data on it? Yes, it's fine. Don't worry about it. Are you one? And I think I must have asked the question 3 times. I got him to sign the little piece of paper that says there's no data on it. 2 weeks later, I need my data off my laptop. So there's that as well. Alternatively, what we are trialing at the moment with taking people's personal laptops is you can have your hard drive back. I'll take the hard drive out, you can have it back. Your data's still there, but we can reuse the shell of the machine. It's a one-way transaction. Once it's here, once I've processed it, that's it. You're not going to get it back as long as you make that very understandable. The other concern our waste department have is an initiative that was run by one of the charities, which was they work closely with the university, and what they wanted to do was put these big boxes around the campus that said, donate your IT equipment here. But what ended up happening with that is it kind of got a bit out of control. So once people started donating things, it wasn't just laptops. Now we're getting kettles and irons and waffle makers. And on top of that, people were breaking into these boxes because they thought they were high value, and it was causing a bit of a headache for us all. So there are those. I think the best way forward with initiatives in that is get a couple of students together who are tech savvy, who enjoy the type of thing, and just say, right, maybe once a week, by appointment, because if you don't do appointment, you're going to just have a rush of people in. But just be by appointment and be like, we'll see if we can help you. A free service, again, is better than no service or paying extraordinary amounts of money for a very simple process to be done for the laptop. So there's that, but I am very wary about the personal donation of devices, because it is their personal machine, and mitigating the liability once you take that machine on is very important. You don't want them to come back, like I had a couple of years ago, be like, oh, my family photos are on that hard drive. Well, I'm sorry, I guess. So there is that. Does that kind of answer what you're looking for? Perfect.
I saw a lot of nodding people when you mentioned the boxes. We indeed had the same experience at VB. Somebody dropped something in the boxes, and the day after, somebody already reused what was in the boxes. So now we have them. You really have to deliver it to someone, and it goes to a closed space, so that nothing is going out. Kenneth, you raise your hand. Go ahead.
Bradley, I have a question regarding the sustainability in your university. Now, for your case, you deal with IT. You are a sustainability leader in the IT department, right? Yeah. What about other departments, like transport department? Within the university, do they have their sustainability leaders in their respective departments?
Thank you, Kenneth. To answer your question with a little more detail to that is the direct answer is yes. So what social responsibility and sustainability do every year is we have what we call the Sustainability Awards. And this is to promote sustainability amongst other departments. For example, you mentioned transport. Transport will have one person in their department who they either completely committed to the sustainability or are employed as a sustainability officer, or it'll be a part of their role. So generally we find with more admin type departments like the corporate groups, it'll be probably a manager who takes on part of that sustainability. And with the sustainability awards, because sustainability is a bit of a difficult thing to get into if you're not very clued up on it. So what the awards do is you get a gold, a silver, and a bronze, and it's different criteria, different sustainable things you can do within your department to meet these things. This is really just a guideline to help people say, right, because a lot of people don't know they don't know where to start with being sustainable, especially in transport. So our transport department recently got rid of half their fleet of delivery vehicles and replaced them with a smaller number, larger capacity electric vehicles. They try and do, if they're moving things around, a more sustainable way of doing that would be instead of making 2 trips the same day to the same place, put it into one job, make it one, so you're only going there and back once rather than twice. So we have these awards, and these awards give out certain criteria, things like reducing paper, keeping the office environment at 21 or 21.5 degrees. So there are people around that all look at their own section of the university and say, how can we make this, or how can we be just a little bit more sustainable?
Yeah, thank you very much. Actually, been an eye-opener. At our university, we have not yet set up real structures on issues sustainability, as much as we do it on a small scale. If it is waste management, if it is IT equipment that end of year, end of life, then we've got policies that regulate disposal. But then again, somebody had mentioned, I don't know if it was Laurent or who, we don't follow to the end. We don't know where these people we sell to will dispose this equipment. So we still have we've got a long way to go. I was just reading the manuals that are on your website concerning sustainability. We have not reached there, but I believe the small scales that we've started, we will. Definitely.